I hope it's nice and cool where you guys are at. It is like 60 degrees here in Oklahoma City. So it feels very odd that school is starting soon, so soon, and it's so nice outside. Okay, so we'll talk about procurement. So today the topics that we're going to talk about is what is procurement, the methods of procurement, awarding the bid, managing the contract, and records. Okay, so what is procurement? Procurement is a multi-step process for obtaining equipment, service, materials, and supplies for the lowest price. And all goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds must be procured using federal guidelines. Procurement made by districts are not in accordance with the government-wide and program-specific requirements cannot be paid with non-profit school food service account funds. Any non-allowable expenditures must be paid with other fund sources such as general funds if you do not procure correctly. And I'm not trying to scare you, it's just if you don't procure at all, like you have to follow the guidelines. It's just, USDE takes procurement very seriously enough that I think all of you have been through at least one procurement review. So as you are aware, if you are aware, that USDA, we now have 2 reviews that you get done. One is a procurement review, and one is your regular AR, your admin review. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but with the procurement review this year, we have actually contracted that out with another company, just because it's a lot to put on the plates of our consultants as well on top of everything else. Now, your procurement review more than likely will be the same year as your administrative review, but it could be different. And one reason why is because as of right now, it is required that if you are self-op, you can get a procurement review once every 5 years. But if you use a food service management company, you are to be reviewed for procurement only every 3 years. So you may be getting a procurement review and not an administrative review. So so you guys are aware of that. That could change. I kind of hope it changes just because it's a lot to keep track of, but on our end, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so what is the purpose of procurement? The primary purpose is to ensure that there is free and open competition. So that is the main goal of procurement, is free and open competition. So what has to be procured? Any product or services purchased with child nutrition funds must be procured using USDA guidelines. So if you're spending child nutrition dollars on it, you must do proper procurement. And procurement, I know, sounds so overwhelming, but really it's a lot easier than what people think. So I'm gonna hopefully make it easier to understand and not make it so overwhelming of all of the requirements. So again, that we mentioned before, all goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds must be used. It must be used by child nutrition, or the price must be prorated based on child nutrition use. When we're doing procurement reviews, one of the things that we ask for is we ask for your expenditures. So we will look to see what you're spending child nutrition funds on. And if it's not for child nutrition purposes, you cannot spend child nutrition funds on that. If you do need a copy of the slides or any of the handouts that we have available, they are located in CARS under other documents under training upcoming. We have all of our slides and all of our handouts for all of our trainings in that area. And it is a file, so you click on it and put open the file, and then it will list all the documents that are in there. But again, just a reminder that all goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds, that it has to be used by child nutrition only. I've seen some that they were paying the entire AT&T cell phone bill for the district out of child nutrition, and you can't do that. You'll have to pay back child nutrition if that happens. Okay, preparing for procurement. In order for procurement process to be successful, it is strongly advised that you familiar yourself with the federal and state regulations prior to beginning. So procurement cannot be effective and fully competitive unless the SFA first spends adequate time planning the process. Planning has a huge effect on the district's ability to obtain high quality products and serves at the lowest price. It also ensures procurement is consistent with applicable laws. The procurement plan establishes the infrastructure for planning and is the same for both informal and formal procurement procedures. So planning the procurement includes determining the goods and services that you need, reaching out to potential contractors, vendors, and developing a procurement schedule. So determining the goods and services needed for the coming year is referred to as forecasting. The time you spend to accurately estimate the quantity and quality of goods, products, and services needed for the school year is important. Use historical information from menus, production records, and average daily participation to help develop your forecast numbers. Forecasting also includes having knowledge of the USDA foods expected for the coming year. This can be achieved by attending related meetings and reviewing documentation received from DHS. So again, with forecasting, take a look at your upcoming numbers. Because we need to, like, did your enrollment maybe change? Because or has it gone down, you may not need as much. Check your inventory, see what you already have in stock. And again, always check your USDA foods to see what you might be getting in. And also the number of ages the students will be served, because again, the high school kids have to have more food. So if you're gonna get a lot more high school kids in than in past years, you'll also have to forecast for that as well. Let's see here. Okay. So now that you have forecasted the products and services being purchased and how much is needed, there are 4 overarching principles and practices that you must use. One is the free and open competition. All suppliers have equal opportunity, does not restrict competition, and does not eliminate competition. Responsive and responsible contractors. Responsive, the products or services meets the district's needs, and responsible, that the vendors can and will meet the terms of the contract. Fairness and integrity, suppliers must be given every consideration. Unethical practices, whether real or apparent, must be corrected immediately by the district. Not addressing unethical practices until potential contractors protest is not appropriate and diminishes the integrity of the procurement process of the district and compromises the employment of the person involved in the practice. And then, of course, transparency. Transparency leads to operation of an account and cost-effective district. To highlight a couple notes in here about like protesting, in the last couple of years, we've been hearing a lot more vendors or companies that have protested bids. Every district is supposed to have protest procedures in place. Make sure that you have those. They do not have to be child nutrition specific. So if you don't have them, we have it in CARS. It's also, I believe, in the handouts that we sent out, and it's in your manual. But again, it doesn't have to be child nutrition specific. You may see if you have someplace on file. If anybody protests a bid, you use your protest procedures to ensure that you follow the steps to do that. And like I said, we've been hearing more about that. Another thing to keep in mind as well is when you're doing procurement, again, we were talking about the protests, like I'm hearing a lot more of it. So just make sure it's a lot of the integrity of the program. I understand that everybody has like their favorite person or someone that they want to use, or you talk to somebody, so you want to use that person, but you still have to be fair the way that you do things, and you just need to document. A lot of the information that you'll need here is document about like why you select who you select. It is also very permissible. So if you give even a food bid, if you give a bid to one of the vendors and another vendor comes out and says, I want to see what they bid, you can give that information to them. You can be transparent. They can see why they didn't get the bid. It's not top secret. So it is permissible if someone says, hey, not only can they protest, but if someone says, hey, I want to see the documentation that was sent in by another vendor or even by my vendor, you can do that. And again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put all your questions in the chat box. And this is just kind of the chain of how it usually goes is the growers usually send it to the manufacturers who go to the distributors and then again to the end user. But these are all people that you can reach out to when doing procurement. There's co-ops. We do have a co-op here in Oklahoma that you can use. We do have state contract as well. State contract was a little bit iffy at one point just for the fact that it did not meet federal regulations, because even us, we have to follow the same procurement guidelines that you have to follow. So it is now state contract works as well. And we'll go over a little bit of some of those when we get to the formal and the small purchase and all that kind of stuff. But again, those are some other things to think about, not just vendors, but we do have co-ops. You guys can start co-ops, but if you do, just let us know about if you wanting to start anything like a co-op where you get with a group of any of your schools, just let us know. The reason why is because we do want you to procure it properly and that we can help with that process. Okay, so we're gonna stop and answer some questions right now. Let's see here. We talked about the slides. We have one question. Let me look at it. So this school, I gave another milk distributor a shot because they were much lower in price. I awarded them the bid in June. Monday, they came in to tell me they can't honor their price. Their supplier went up. Now I'm having to reach out to the other company for help.
I guess, do they have a bond on that bid?
Did you have a bond on that bid? Just checking to see if you did. No, I don't, probably not. That's okay. Yes, and the thing is when we talk about procurement, and we're going to soon, you don't always have to go lowest. And we understand there are reasons you will pick other people, and we will talk about all that. So they want free and open competition, but USDA also understands it's not always the lowest price that you're going to go with. And there's reasons why, but you have to document. And when we do these reviews, and I'm going to kind of explain the review a little bit as well, if you have not been through one, these reviews are done a little bit differently than how we do the admin review. These reviews are done at the desk, meaning we really don't come out at all to the district. What happens is usually around November, December, you'll be getting an email with documents that we need you to send in and an Excel spreadsheet. And in that Excel spreadsheet, there's one page that you have to fill out, and it has to match your expenditure worksheet that you send us. And we look at previous year. We look at the previous year that was completed. And then when you send that in, we get all 100 of them at the same time, then we select certain vendors based on what you did with that procurement. So with the procurement review, the biggest issue that we've seen is people are not listing their vendors in the correct way that they procured it. Procuring it is how you procured it, not the dollar, not necessarily just because it's under a certain dollar amount. So it's how you procure it. So we will be talking again about the steps with that. But first we're going to start talking about the procurement plan. So every district should have a procurement plan, and they hopefully have a more updated one. When we first started doing the procurement reviews, everybody's was from 2016. So everybody, there's things that are required to be in there. It does need to be board approved. but you do not have to have it board approved every year. You only have to have it board approved whenever you make changes. But some items that your procurement plan must include is the methods of procurement, the chart of procedures, code of conduct, protest procedures, Buy American, minority firms, women's business enterprises, and labor surplus statement, geographical preference, and beverage. So we do have a prototype. We have a prototype that is out on cars. It is also in the handouts that we gave you. The district is more than welcome to use our prototype. It has everything in it that meets USDA guidelines. There's also things in there that you can adjust. So when we talk about the procurement plan and like the methods of procurement and dollars amount, you can change that information. Now, I know some people are like, but we're small, we don't use some of the stuff that is in the procurement plan. You may use some of that information in there at some time. At some point, you may not be using it now. I would suggest leaving it in there. Something else is that on all contracts over $25,000, you do need to have a non-kickback affidavit as well. So the things that need to be in the procurement plan on the methods of procurement is informal method and your formal methods. And we'll talk about each of these. We'll talk about the micro purchasing, small purchase, non-competitive. Micro purchasing and small purchase procedures are going to be your most common. Formal is your invitation for bid, which is also a sealed bid, and your request for proposal. And to be I'm going to be very frank with you. If you do not have to do formal procurement, I just suggest you don't. It's just a lot more work. It's a lot more work. So if you don't have to, we even have big districts because of the way that they award the bid, they don't have to do formal on a lot of things, or maybe they use state contract. But we'll talk about some of that information. Do you have any questions regarding the procurement plan? Make sure you have one on file. Please skim through it. Look at the slides. Those two slides, I'll kind of go back to them. Make sure it has this information in it. The protest procedures don't have to be in the procurement plan. They just have to be that you just have to have them. And the chart of procedures, we do have it at the end of our procurement plan, but again, we have examples of what it is. Chart of procedures, all chart of procedures is telling us the food items, how often you go out on procurement, and how you're procuring it. And we get a question a lot on that one from people that are using a food service management company saying, well, we're not buying the food, so I don't have to have a chart of procedures. You do. You still have to have one. So say you're using a food service management company and they're purchasing the food for you. So you can put in how often you are procuring it is as needed. And I tell everybody to put in how you're procuring it to do micro and / small purchase. Because a truck could not show up one day. You may have to run under the store and go grab something. Okay, we're going to talk about micro purchasing, small purchasing, and non-competitive. We're going to talk about the forms of informal procurement. Is the non-kickback $25,000? We do have a question. Is the non-kickback $25,000 for the year or the per PO? It's per the PO. Because we've gone back and forth on that several times of what our understanding was.
Another question, we use Canvas Smart for US Foods. Can anyone tell me what my procurement plan should contain? I've been a little confused.
Okay, so if you're using Campus Smart, you are using a co-op. So you will need to have a copy of that contract on file whenever you started. And each year I would also suggest getting a copy of I think it's attachment A and attachment B. It lists that your school is participating in that smart campus. Whenever we come out to do the review, your procurement review, we will need that information to make sure that you're on there. Your procurement plan still should have everything else like everybody else's. I would not change anything about it, because your procurement plan is not just for food. It is for anything that you buy for child nutrition. And it's just stating like, and again, we're going to go more into depth about that right now, about what it is. But I would keep your procurement plan the same. I wouldn't change a lot of it, just because at the time right now you're doing Campus Smart. So first we'll talk about micro purchasing, and this one gets very confusing for some people about what it is and not the significance of it, but to be honest with you, this is kind of meant for our daycares to use, and this is more meant for emergency type purchases. Micro purchasing may be used when the acquisition or supplies or service is $10,000 or less. Micro purchasing can be done as a single purchase of products or services. Aggregate cost does not exceed $10,000. There is no solicitation or getting any competitive quotes if the price is considered to be reasonable. So the reason why I say this is mostly for our daycares and this is mostly for emergency purchases is because you don't do price bids, you just buy, but you have to buy, it has to be a reasonable cost. It can't be like, I'm gonna spend $30 on a pound of hamburger meat. That's not reasonable. I mean, it might be reasonable right now during COVID, but you have to spread the wealth. So if you're buying hamburger meat, are you buying it from multiple sources? You can't just buy it from one person. So that's why we say it's mostly for like emergency purchases, because you probably use a vendor for your food, and then the bread didn't come in on the truck that you needed. So you're running down to the store just to go buy bread because you need it. But you are buying it from somebody else. So you did spread the wealth, but you didn't get price quotes. What we've seen a lot, like during the procurement review, is people put pest control. Well, they're only getting pest control from one person. So they're not spreading the wealth. You have to spread the wealth with micro purchasing. If you're doing maybe repairs, that can maybe be micro purchasing, because if you're getting like, oh, my fridge went, so I use this guy for my fridge, I use this guy for my freezer. But if you're using like just one person, you do need to do a different method, because micro purchasing is spreading the wealth. The reason I say daycares are on our program as well is because they're buying from Crest and Walmart and Sam's, all kinds of places that they're buying from. They're not buying from just one store. So I hope everybody understands the difference, what micro purchasing actually is because people see the $10,000 and be like, well, I just spent less than $10,000, so it's a micro purchasing. That's not what micro purchasing is. Micro purchasing is buying items from multiple vendors, but you're not getting quotes, but the prices are reasonable. Again, spreading the wealth. Program operators may not always purchase from only one source, rather from multiple sources. And again, the price it needs to be reasonable. So that is micro purchasing. So when you see that on your procurement review, just make sure, like again, your local grocery store might be one, any place that you're just having to buy from, but you're buying from multiple people and not checking prices. This is the most common right here, is small purchase procedures. Small purchase is for those that are if you spend under $250,000. Also to note, that is the federal guideline, is $250,000. Your district may have a smaller amount. If they give a smaller amount, it will just be listed in the procurement plan. So when we get your procurement plan during your procurement review and your district says our small purchase procedures are under 100,000, we're gonna go by what your district does. But the federal will allow up to $250,000. With small purchase, you just sent out specifications, which is essentially your specifications is you're just telling them what you want. Must be sent out to at least 2 qualified sources. The big thing with small purchase is you're getting price quotes. And you could be buying a $5 calculator and say you look at Walmart and you look at Amazon, you just did small purchase. All you have to do is check prices. You can check prices by email, by phone, by catalogs, by a website. You don't necessarily have to go out and send out. I mean, the most common is your food. So you're writing specifications. You're writing that you want 80-20 ground beef in a 5-pound roll frozen. That's your specification. You're telling them you're telling these vendors what you want to buy. But if there's some things that you can just go look or just call people, like you're wanting you need new pots and pans. So you call 2 different vendors just to get their price. If you check prices at all, you are doing small purchase. Even if it's a $5 item that you're checking prices on, you're doing small purchase. The requirement per USDA is that you send it out, your specifications, like say for a food vendor or your milk or anything like that, maybe equipment, that you send it to a minimum of 2 vendors. However, those vendors do not have to respond. Your requirement was to send it to 2 or more sources. That's it. And we suggest that you document who you sent it to. And we have a lot of forms that you can use to document. And this is one of them. Again, these are all in the procurement section of the training manual, and they're also in the handouts. But you can use your own. You do not have to use these forms, but we do want you do need to document who you sent items to. The last informal that we'll talk about is non-competitive proposal. Non-competitive proposal is a procurement through solicitation of a proposal from only one source, or after a solicitation of a number of sources, competition is determined inadequate. So non-competitive proposal may be used when the award of the contract is not feasible under small purchase procedures, sealed bid, or non-competitive proposals, and at least one of the following circumstances apply. The item is available from only one source. An emergency circumstances will not permit a delay resulting in competitive solicitation, and competition is determined to be inadequate after solicitation of a number of sources. And the awarding agency authorized non-competitive proposal, which would be us, which is the State Department. Again, that is one that can be used for emergency circumstances. The computer system that we used, we were only able to get the information from one source. So, but you do have to document if it's anything non-competitive of why you were on. I mean, it's one thing is different if it's like you went out for bid and only one person responded. But non-competitive is when there's really literally only one source that you can buy this one particular item from that you need. There is nobody else that can do it at all. Like it just doesn't exist except from one person. Okay, let's take some questions.
So if we only have one milk vendor that ever sends us a bid, do we have to advertise to receive bids?
Okay, Heath, that's a really good question about the milk. You still have to send out to at least one other source. We tell a lot of people, even though one milk vendor will come to you, you never know when somebody else might start coming to you. And I always check with who you get your food from as well. They all carry milk. It doesn't mean you have to buy your milk from them, but you do have to get milk from multiple vendors. Yes, I'll repeat the question because it was not to everybody. So it says, if we only have one milk vendor that ever sends us a bid, do we have to advertise to receive bids? Depending on if you're doing advertising that's formal, you don't necessarily have to advertise for small purchase, but you do have to reach out to more than one other person. And again, you can do it to your food vendor. And again, you never know who might start coming to you if you put out bids. We have, in my old territory, they had only really one food source, and people started sending out to multiple people, multiple vendors, and they started getting another vendor that is now in competition with the other one. So you never know who might come, but you can't just because you're like, well, only one person will come. You can still get a milk bid from your food vendor as well. Or at least reach out. They do not have to respond, but you do have to reach out to multiple people.
Here's another question.
Is the minimum requirement for at least 2 sources a USDA requirement? Is that different from uniform guidance? 2 CFR definition, adequate number of sources. It used to be 3, but 2, we have been told by USDA it is a minimum of 2. And what about an emergency like a water heater? Does that play a factor in the job if the job needs to get done ASAP? That is also under non-competitive, is emergency.
It needs to be done.
But yes, it does need to be documented as well.
So David Young will research that a little better and make sure that that's
Yeah.
how it comes back on the USDA tool is to.
Yeah. David was asked the question about the 2 sources. That is how it is listed on the procurement review. But we will get back. We will double check all that because to me, it needs to be an adequate number, and we know 1 would not be an adequate number. So that's why we believe it's 2 or more. We used to say 3 was an adequate number. So, but on the tool, the actual procurement review, it says 2. But we say the more you send it out, the better. Okay, next we're going to do formal. But again, if you do have questions, if you could put them into all panelists and chat, that would be very helpful so everybody can see the questions. We will send the questions out with the answers. After this is done, we are combining, give us about a week, but we are combining the procurement that we did last week and the one with this week. We'll add all the questions together. And again, if you can put all your questions put your chat box to all panelists and attendees, or all panelists and everyone, or just so everybody can see the questions. Okay, next is formal procurement. So formal procurement is for anything that is over the threshold of $250,000 or whatever your district's threshold is. Again, specifications also must be submitted to a minimum of 2 vendors. It does require an advertisement in a newspaper and any other place that you might advertise, like your website, your school website. But with small purchase, you can just contact people. That's all you have to do to get prices. But formal procurement is much more formal, and you do have to have, there's a lot of steps. Again, you have to send out specifications just like you would with informal, but you also have to advertise. Again, even though you send it out to multiple people, not everybody has to respond. It's okay. I think I've heard in some states that they require, what I've been told from other states is on the procurement review, if they don't respond, you have to keep on sending stuff out until someone does, which I don't know how they can require that because you can't help people responding to you. When you do formal in your advertisement, you do have to specify a day and time of the bid opening. It's a very formal procedure. You have to have a time that you open the bids, and you cannot open them before. And if someone sends it to you after the deadline, it has to be, it's called non-responsive because they did not respond by the time that was required. So with formal procurement, USDA suggests 45 days for a sealed bid or an invitation for bid, and 60 days for a request for proposal from the time that you give the vendors the information until the bid opening. But we are a little bit more lax in Oklahoma, but it should not be any less than 30 days. because you have to give these vendors time to look at it and send some. By the time they look at it, they have to process it themselves of what they want to give you a bid at and to give it back to you by the deadline. Because again, if you do it shorter than that, that's not free and open competition. So if you do what we call a sealed bid or an IFB, that is what is more common. And so when you have that date and time specified in your advertisement, say 5 o'clock on, what day is it? August 6th. We'll say August 6th at 5 o'clock, you're opening these bids. When you open them up, whoever has the lowest price wins the bid. No exceptions. That's how sealed bid works. Long ago, it used to be required that milk had to be done by sealed bid. That is not the case anymore. You do not have to do it sealed bid. Just because they may send it to you in a sealed envelope does not mean, unless you're following these requirements, putting it in the paper, advertising, all that kind of stuff, then you're not doing sealed bid. You may just be doing informal and they sent you the bid in a sealed envelope. But we get a lot of people that are having issues with, like they're saying they're doing a sealed bid and they're not, when they're actually doing small purchase procedures. So that's why we really want to go over what these are. So when you fill out your procurement tool, you know where to select it, because it's how you procure, not the dollar amount. It's how you procure the items. So the request for a proposal, which is an RFP, it is required if you are going to go food service management company contract. We have a state prototype, and to get that prototype, you'll have to contact Becky Gray at the State Department. But it is a request for a proposal that we do in the state of Oklahoma. How you award an RFP is based on highest points on an evaluation criteria that you create. We have an example. There is one. We put one in the procurement plan this year in case you guys do. You can change some of the items of the evaluation. Price alone is usually not, when people do a request for proposal, it's not just the price of why they're, say, because like with a food service management company, it's the services they provide, it's other things they provide. Price has to be the primary reason for consideration, but it's not, you do not have to award it to the lowest bidder. It's awarded to the contract when you do your highest weighted evaluation who has the highest points. And this is an example of that. One thing that I have seen with looking at some of the bids from food service management company is, an example is a school district gave everybody the same number of points. So what you would do here, I'm going to use this as an example. So here on the weighted, say that you give price 15 points, and then you give service capability 5 points, quality 5 points, experience 5 points, so on. But price has to have the most points. You have to dictate what the points are going to be, and whenever you're sending out your contract or whenever you post it, you have to tell them what the point system is before. You can't just be like, okay, we're gonna do 5 points for this. You have to do that before you send your contract out for people to bid on it. What is your point system? We had one school that they had 2 or 3 that sent back prices. They all 3 had different prices, but they gave everybody the same points. So say 15 points for price, 5 for service. You can't do that. If one's a higher price, you give them lower points. The lowest price, you give the highest points. So they could have done 15 points, 10 points, and 5 points. They could have done 15 points for the one that gave them the lowest, 14 points for the one that gave them the middle one, and 13 points that gave them the lowest or the highest. You have to, it can't be everybody just gets the same number of points. You have to evaluate, especially when it comes to price. You can give everybody else the same points, but if you get different prices, you have to give them points based on what they give you. So another thing when you do formal procurement, there's clauses and forms that you'll have to get that is required. This is coming from straight from the procurement review. You do have to have Buy American information in all contracts. You do have to have USDA equal opportunity information, termination for cause information, Clean Water Act provision. And these items are all listed in our procurement plan as well, that is located on in the book and in CARS. You will also have to have contract worked hours and safety for the Safety Standard Act, the non-kickback affidavit, Davis-Bacon information, debarment and suspicion form, and the Byrd anti-lobbying form. Depending on how much your contract is worth, that's when you have to get these forms. So it's not just as easy as small purchase. That's why we really highly recommend, if you don't have to do formal, not to. With the procurement plan, in the formal section, I know people are like, well, we're small, we'll never do formal. Keep the formal in there. There's boxes that you can check. One is like for food service management company, because you may be small. It doesn't matter if the contract is $5,000. If you go with the food service management company, you have to do an RFP. You have to do formal. It's not based on the dollar amount. It's based on the fact that you're doing a food service management company contract. And again, even with small purchase, it can be a $5 item, but you're getting prices on it. If you're checking prices, that's a small purchase. It can be a $10 item and you want to do formal procurement, and you can do formal procurement, but you still have to follow all the rules that are required with formal procurement. So one thing that USDA does harp on is that you cannot arbitrarily divide your purchases to fall below simplified acquisition just to avoid doing formal procurement. I don't think a lot of schools do that, but they just don't want you doing it on purpose so you don't have to do formal, because it is a lot of work. Formal is a lot of work. Okay, next we're going to talk about solicitation, and we have a couple of questions. The Q&As will be on CARS when we are completed with them, along with every other Q&A that we will be doing, what we've done with every other workshop. Is electronic submission of sealed bids permitted, provided the system uses restricts the school district from assessing the bids until the bid opening date and time? I don't think there's anything wrong with getting electronic submissions. I just know you can't really, look at them or open them before, and as long as everybody knows how to submit, I think it'd be provided. I have a question about, you need a cheat sheet. We actually, if you go out and look on the handouts, there is a flow chart that's out there. It's a really neat little, to me, a cheat sheet to let you know kind of what you should be doing and how you're doing it. So we did create a neat, well, actually they got it at a USDA and we kind of played with it a little bit, but it is called I think it's called the procurement flow chart. It's in the handouts, and it's also, I believe it's on CARS in other documents, maybe under procurement. I'm not 100% sure, but I need to make sure it's out there, because it is a really, really good, easy one-page cheat sheet. And again, it's the flow chart. Any other questions about formal? The handouts, all the handouts, we did not email them. The handouts are all located in other documents under training upcoming, and then it's where all the links are, but there's a little folder that you click on and hit open, and it opens a file, and that's where all the handouts are for all of our trainings that we've been doing. That's where the slides are. We've been trying to keep everything in one location. Okay, now we're going to talk about solicitation and bid information. Okay, potential contractors, these are some things that are not allowed. Any potential contractor writing the bid, proposal, or product specifications, that's not allowed. The specifications are to be written by the school district. Now you can take, say, your printer, your vendor printout. So say you like you like the meat that they give you. They give you 80-20, 10-pound roll, frozen in a case. I'm just probably making a lot of stuff up. You can take the vendor printout and write that down, just write it down, but you can't also take the vendor printout and hand it to other vendors and say, this is what I want. You, the school district, is what has to do that. So any potential contractor evaluating the bid or submitting a bid, they cannot, that's unallowable. And again, it's not allowed procurement. You have to make purchases following procurement procedures. And these are, we went over all the procedures, so there's several to choose from, but you just have to make sure you properly procure. So at the very least, you should have a solicitation letter. And here are some of the items that should be on there. It should be on letterhead. It should include the date of the letter. You can include the specifications, the method the school district would like the vendor to respond. Oops. What the district, how you want them to respond, the date you want them to respond, and what the district will or will not accept. These are some things that I would suggest putting in this little letter. And we kind of have an example, but really you can make this letter your own and you can make it one page. But I would put things in there like what the district will or will not accept as far as, say, substitutions or shortages the vendor might have. For instance, you can request in your specifications that you receive chicken nuggets with a CN label. State within your solicitation letter that for any items that require a CN label, you will only accept CN labeled products as a substitution. Then should a substitution be made with an item not CN labeled, you would have reason for, say, cause for termination. It can state information like the vendor will contact the district before making substitutions. It's whatever you want to put in there to help you out. We even have suggested that you can even put a line at the bottom of your letter and then have them sign it when they send it back to you, just saying that they're agreeing to your terms. This is especially for informal. I know a lot of formal, it's usually a larger contract, but you don't have to have a formal contract with small purchase, but we just suggest so you're all on the same page and they're agreeing to it. I've had several stories of when I've had a district that they're like, yeah, we agree that they were coming twice a week at this time on these days. And then the vendor's like, nope, we're coming once a week. That's it. And that's not what they agreed upon. So sometimes it's just nice to have that in writing because you have a little bit more teeth. Let's see here. Some other information to have in your solicitation letter is have the equal opportunity employment statement. I would definitely put by American. And then again, termination for cause and any special conditions. It can state information like when the district might terminate, such as if a district contacts the vendor with the same complaint a minimum of 3 times regarding such things as quality or price changing, like overcharging on what was quoted, substituting without contacting the institution, or substituting CN label items for non-CN label items, changing the agreement without consent from the district. Those are just some examples that you can put in there. A district can also give a vendor special conditions, like you want all nutrition facts labels. Just be specific with what you are wanting. Not that they can't be negotiated. Some things can be negotiated, but make this how you want it. You're the one in charge of the process. And I think sometimes schools forget about that. They think the vendor's in control, because I think the vendors try to do that sometimes. The vendors work for you. I've learned a lot about vendors between this and some other things that I've helped with. They all get commission. The vendors get, your sales guy gets commission. So for instance, and I've had this, I've seen it happen, and I've heard stories about, say you have chicken nuggets, this one that you buy, then you get another one, there's no CN label on it. And of course we're coming for review and we need to see your CN label on this product, and you don't have one because it doesn't have one. Well, I know with some of the vendors, like they can get bonus. The salesman can get bonus for selling you that other chicken nugget. Like he can get $2 per box that he sells. I'm not saying they're all like that. I'm just saying that just you are in control of the contract, and just watch. I had a school that told me that they started, when they substituted without calling them and doing stuff like that, or the price was wrong, that what they quoted them, they would tell him to put it back on the truck. And she said he did it twice, and that's all it took, because he did not want to have to take what he gave me, put it back on the truck and haul it around and try to work around the stuff that I had him put back on the truck. And here's just kind of a copy of the solicitation letter that we have. We have one in the book. Again, this is just an example. I have heard stories about people using this and not even changing the name at the top to their public school. Again, you can copy and paste this, add to it. You can make it 2 pages long. This is especially really good to use for your food and milk. You don't have to do a solicitation for everything. Like I said, it could be an item that you're needing just to go to Walmart for, and you check Amazon pricing. When you're going out checking prices, it's different, but when they're bringing prices back to you, this is kind of the information that you need. So again, with solicitation, when soliciting quotes or bids from potential contractors, it is both necessary for both formal and informal, because they assure that all potential contractors are receiving the same information. So that is the thing with all of these. They all need to be getting the same information, because they all need to be bidding back, because we use, like with specifications, we'll use the example of, say that you want hamburger meat. You want 80-20 hamburger meat in a 10-pound roll. Well, say you get bids back, you didn't specify that. You just say you wanted hamburger meat 80-20. One vendor gives you a really good price, and one vendor's price is a little higher. Well, come to find out, that really low price was not for a 10-pound roll. It was for a 5-pound roll. That's why you have to be specific with what you want. And again, while telephone calls may be a part of the process, just make sure that free and open competition is being used. The process is documented to show compliance with all applicable requirements, and provide documentation in the event a contractor or potential contractor believes they are not given the same information or opportunity. As with any procurement, the first thing the district should do in procuring goods and services for a specified procurement period is use small purchase to determine the specific time for each good and service is needed, the specific quantity or frequency needed during the procurement period, and the quality needed. And we're going to talk a little bit, I'll answer some other questions as well, but in your contract, especially with formal contracts, you can have the contract like a food service management company contract that it's good for 1 year with up to 4-year renewals. You can do stuff like that, but it needs to be in your solicitation. Everybody has to know that. And again, if you do that, because I've had a couple of schools doing procurement reviews that's what they did, and they were in year 3 of their bid, I would have them send me the original contract that showed this information. So that's one other thing that you can do as well. You can also do renewals agreements. Let's see, if you are using state contract under small purchase threshold, do you need to get other quotes, or should that be identified in procurement plan that is the source being used? Great question, Becky. Definitely check that you're using state contract. There is a box in there showing that you're using state contract. The beauty of state contract or co-ops is the procurement process has already been completed. The state actually did it formally. And then actually the co-ops, all of them did it formally. So what I tell people in procurement, especially for the procurement review, if you're doing state contract, put the vendor name, which is Cisco, who has been awarded the bid. I put state contract in the comments section, which that's a great question. But if you use anybody else, they've already done the procurement for you, so you do not have to go out on bid for state contract.
You might explain, we were having them get 2 quotes 2 years ago because the state contract was not.
And I touched a little bit about it, but a couple of years ago, so some people are like, what? That's not what we were told a couple years ago. So 2 years ago, state contract was not procured per USDA guidelines. It did not have Buy American in it. And so USDA, even though our process is huge because it's the state of Oklahoma, they would not like say, well, the next grandfathered in. the state did go, they kind of had to go, they did a rebid, essentially is what they did early. And they did include everything required for child nutrition, so it now does meet USDA standards. So if we told you a couple years ago that you need to go out on bid, even if you're using state contract, that is no longer the case, because luckily they went out kind of on an early rebid and they included everything that was needed for child nutrition. And when you're doing any of the procurement, say something might change. For instance, you want your delivery dates changed. You talk to one person and want to change it. If that occurs, anything that you want to make changes to the during the solicitation, you must reach out to everybody else that you sent a solicitation to and let them know. Everybody has to be able to bid on the same thing. Are there any other questions about the solicitation? If you do want state contract or are interested in state contract, you will contact Teresa Johnson. Her information is in our training manual in the procurement section. So that's who you would contact. They just asked that we'll talk about that they would like you to use them 80% of the time. I will tell you with state contract, and Becky Gilbert may have to really chime in more on this because I think a lot of her schools in her district use it. But so the state contract, it is used for any entity that is state owned. So example, you may not want to always go with the lowest, cheapest green beans because it may be grade C and you want grade A because they sell to state-run prisons, state-run hospitals, anybody state-run. And make sure, like, not everything's gonna have a CN label, so just check the CN labels and that kind of information. But as what I've been told with state contract, is they are required to go to anybody who wants to use them in the state of Oklahoma, like a school, that they're required to come to you. So we've had some schools, and I get because of their location, no one will service them. There was a school a few years ago that they couldn't get milk or bread. They had to go to Sam's. No one would service them. So it's another source that you can use. And we're so glad that they rebid that per USDA guidelines. Okay, awarding the bid. Okay. So the biggest thing is to document. Again, if you have any renewals, we need to know about all this. Keep all your records. So the reason I tell you about your procurement review, we look at previous year records, is you may not want to put them in the attic, because I think that's happened quite a bit, because we will look at everything that you procured from the previous school year. Now, if you're using a food service management company, we will look at some things from current year. But, oh, that was good. What was I going to say? I was going to say something about the procurement review. We will look at previous year, a little bit of current, but we need to look at the things that you did because you've already completed that year. If you are self-op 1 year, and you go food service management company 1 year. So say you're with self-op last year and you go food service management company this year, we'll look at both years. Say you're food service management company 1 year and you go self-op this current year, we will look at both years. So just to kind of, I guess, warn you. So we're going to talk about awarding. There's 3 ways to award the bid. We'll go into more detail. We also, in the handouts there, and we have it in the book as well, is we talk about these 3 items, but it's also an advantage and disadvantage of each one. I believe that one of the most common is the prime vendor. The other is market basket or groupings, product groupings. And then the other one is line item. And I want Dana to tell her story about line item here in a little bit. Line item is not very popular, and we'll explain why. So the main one that a lot of schools use is prime vendor. This is where a school uses the vendor that they'll use the most. They'll basically take, say if you get 2 bids back, they look at everything as a whole and mostly go with the cheapest one. And again, if you're using small purchase, you don't have to go with the cheapest one if you can document why you're not. Maybe it's because the other guy can't deliver but once a week. Maybe because the quality, you've had issues with them in the past with the quality that they give you. Just make sure you document. I can't stress enough, if you have any issues, document. Example, milk. I had a school district that was buying milk from their vendor, their food vendor, and instead of going through like just a regular milk company. And the milk they kept getting was spoiled. It was showing up busted. They just had a lot of issues with it, the milk. They documented every time they had these occurrences, because what happens is when you do that, if they send you a bid the next year, you can refuse to look at the bid. And if they ask why, you have the documentation of all the issues that you had in the past of why you decided not to go with them. So it protects you, honestly, it really protects you, because they could come back and protest, but you have the documentation of why or why not you did not go with them, even though they may have been the lowest. And again, here are the advantages and disadvantages. You only have one supplier. Orders are placed, delivered kind of all at once. So, and I do understand too, with some of you, prime vendor may be one of the only ways you can do it, because I know a lot of them may have case numbers, case minimums to deliver. So to me, this is another really popular one, is Market Basket. And Market Basket is when you go with grouping. So say you buy your fruits and vegetables all from one vendor, you buy your milk from a vendor, you buy your meats from another vendor. That's called Market Basket, or when you product group. And again, some advantages and disadvantages of doing all of that. And it does allow for more vendors. And a lot of our bigger schools tend to do that. But I mean, I have some smaller schools too that they may buy equally from 2 vendors. And there's why, because they can get all they like the taste quality of from their CN labeled products from one, and then they buy, say, their fruits and veggies from another. But I honestly, when I was doing procurement reviews, I love seeing when schools were using multiple vendors, because when I see that you're using 2 vendors, if you can, you're really looking at prices, because there's a reason why you're using multiple vendors. So the last one is the line item. And this is when you literally, you do your hamburger meat from one, you do your apples from another vendor, you do your cheese from a vendor. And there may be times that you do some line items. I know there's a couple of districts, or you may even do farm to school. You may have a local farmer that you're buying onions from. That could be a line item right there. But I'll let Dana unmute hers and tell you her story about her fun experience with line item.
All right, Kendra.
Something else I was going to kind of mention too with here again is a form that you can, oops.
They said they lost it. You know why? My story they didn't hear.
Okay, you guys are back now? We're back, okay. You guys didn't hear her story. Poor Dana. So she did line item. Did you guys hear any of it? They did line item, and she had 5 different vendors that she had to use, and it was just ended up being kind of a nightmare. She didn't mean to do line item, but she did line item. But it was a really good story. And then again, we have, let's see here. Device. There we go. Again, we have the advantages. You can get best price, but it is a lot of work, especially when you're dealing with multiple vendors and buying from a lot of people. Again, here's another form that you can use. We have a lot of different forms and logs out there that, again, you can use to help document. We even have one that we made for Market Basket and even line item. It's even more detailed than this that you can really check prices with as well. Now, something when you solicit, you guys can choose how you solicit, and that's what you'll put on your chart of procedures. So you'll put how often do you go out on bid. And we were kind of talking about it on the last procurement, and I really wanted we kind of bring it up. It's about the time frame now and pricing. So they should really be holding on to the price that they tell you that they're going to honor. But I would definitely put in your solicitation letter, like how long will they allow that pricing? We understand that with like fruits and veggies, it can go up and down. I mean, there could be a freeze on oranges one year, and so prices are going to go up. But you may want to do your solicitation a little bit closer together than maybe once a year. It's interesting because like I had a school that they were actually going out on bid every month, and it's a little bit larger of a district, and I was really surprised. She goes, it's really not that hard because her specifications are written, and all she does is send an email out to the same vendors for prices. She does it once a month. But you may want to consider doing solicitation every semester, but I would definitely ask in the solicitation or put something in your solicitation about how long how long are they going to honor that bid? How long are they going to honor that price? Is something I think is very valid for them to give you. But it does sound like it can be a lot of work. But if you're doing small purchase, again, she kept her solicitation letter and email. She would just change the dates, and then she would just have her specifications already there. And specifications are just always a work in progress. And she would just send them out once every month. You could do it every 2 months, maybe every semester. But they really should be honoring the price that they give you. We understand they're probably not going to honor a price for the whole year, but I would definitely have something in your solicitation letter about that. We kind of forget about that aspect about that. Because the next thing is managing the contract. So once you award the contract, the final phase is managing it. Federal regulations require that districts maintain a contract management system to document whether contractors have met the terms, conditions, and specifications of the contract. It focuses on ensuring that federal dollars are used to purchase and receive what the district needs to operate the school nutrition program. The contract management documents are useful in resolving protests and provide evidence of non-responsible contractors. This is the thing that we see a lot. Is people are not managing the contract. Just that is the biggest thing, is once the contract has been in place, you do have to manage it. We get a lot of it here in child nutrition, but like, for instance, we get a lot of people that are like, well, we went with the food service management company because we want nothing to do with child nutrition. Honestly, if you go with the food service management company, you have to do more with child nutrition because you have to manage the contract on top of everything else. Just because you may have somebody doing stuff doesn't mean the school always has the responsibility of what's going on. And that's for any contract. It's not just food service management. It's any contract you have, you really should be managing it. I was at a daycare and they were actually using a vendor, and oh my gosh, they were not managing that contract. The prices they were paying and the food items that they were getting, everything was individually wrapped, and the prices were double than what they could have gotten other places. So just be careful, because it's not really good stewards of child nutrition dollars if you're not managing that contract, because they could be raking you over the coals and you not really realizing it. So the contract management phase is the part of the process that assures the district is getting what you paid for. The focus is ensuring that the goods and services outlined in solicitation and resulting contract are provided. So the district monitors the goods and services it receives to make sure that it receives the quantity and the quality of the good and services it requested, receives the goods and services on time, and is charged the correct amount. Documenting this information supports payment to the contractors. And we do have a lot of different vendors in here. We don't have a list of vendors in our book, but definitely, again, when you're soliciting, reach out to multiple people. You never, ever know who might come into your area and start providing services for you. It happened a couple of years ago when I was in the field. Like I said, they had one vendor. They kind of reached a couple of schools in the area, reached out to another vendor, and they started now servicing them. A lot of them have been moving, so it's a lot of good competition. So just some best practices: make sure the contract is clear and concise, communicate that contract, train your employees. Like I said, they should know whenever, if you have multiple sites, they should be getting the invoice and say, no, this is not the price that we were supposed to be getting, when they're signing and dating that invoice. Do you guys have any questions about the management of it? Don't forget that piece of management.
No question.
No questions. And sometimes it's hard. I was just kind of thinking about we were doing procurement reviews. I wish they're supposed to be changing the review some. I would have a lot of suggestions for them. I'm sure they will not take them. But one of it we understand too is that there may be a contract that the school procures, but you're using that contract in child nutrition. That gets a little bit tricky, and to be honest, it's hard for us even in here of how do we do this in the procurement review whenever your school district procures something and you're using it. You may still, I would suggest reaching out to another vendor, but you're probably getting lower prices since the school procured it. But also I would talk to the school and say, hey, listen, if you're procuring this vendor and we're to use them, especially if it's like a food vendor, you may say, can you please add like Buy American into this? There are certain things that has to be in there for child nutrition. As much a part of that process that you can be in there too, you really need to be in there, even though you're using a bid, you're using a vendor that the school procured that you didn't necessarily procure, but you're using them. Pest control is a big one. I'm thinking of other vendors like the vending machine vendors like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and all those are the other ones that I see that the school district procures that child nutrition uses. I would really talk to the school and say, we need to be a part of this. This is our guidelines. Like we had to do it. We had to do it with state contract. I mean, the schools use it. We had to really get in there and say, our schools can't, and that's what happens. We have been wanting to have a conversation with state contract about this for years, and they went and listened to us. What finally happened is our schools were like, well, we can't use state contract anymore, which they can. They just had to go out on bid, and they're like, because you guys didn't procure it correctly. And the guy finally went to her and said, we are missing things that the schools can't just use us like they did in the past. They have to go out on bid because we did not follow USDA guidelines. And then they finally listened to us and went out on rebid. So we have to follow it too. I know, it's a pain. Okay, so we're towards the end. The records, again, we talked a little bit about the procurement review. I talked about how they're every 5 years or every 3 years. We're hoping, the goal is we do want them in the same year as your review. But that doesn't mean that it necessarily is going to happen. And also, again, these reviews are done very differently. We're not going to come out to your school. We may, but more than likely we will not. But it's a process. So we'll ask for information at the front. We'll send you stuff. We'll need it back. And then we'll send stuff and say, listen, now we need X, Y, Z. We will need invoices. So again, you may want to keep your procurement stuff out from the previous year, because we will need in there, we will need invoices. We will select just a sample, whatever sample we have to pull, and then we will let you know the vendors selected for review. If you're a food service management company, the food service management company contract will always be in review. And also, if you use a food service management company, please get your renewal in. We need your addendum for this upcoming year. We've had a lot of issues getting them in previous years. We need that. So these are some of the documents that we look at. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it is what we will ask for to see. And again, we are using a company, it's DWG Consulting. So just in case you get something weird from them, that is, we have been contracting them out. They are an auditing firm that we have used. And just a reminder to, before you purchase, you know, money must be encumbered before goods and services are ordered. Invoices must be signed and dated upon receipt of goods. Price quotes must be documented for all items purchased. Again, vendor printouts are not your specifications. And when we ask for specifications, it's a work in progress. Just once a week, do one sheet. We have a sheet that you can use. It allows for 10, but you are more than welcome. Just write down the things you do that you like, that you need. You can use the vendor printouts to help write your specifications, but really the district should do that. And maintain all the documentation. Keep all your documents for procurement 3 years from the date of final payment or until all audit protest findings are resolved. Just make sure you keep your documents. And again, I can't stress enough, you probably don't want to put last year's records for procurement in the attic until after you know that you're not getting procurement reviewed. And I don't know if it will happen. It happened this year. There were some people that were reviewed for procurement last year and got a procurement review for this year. What's happened is if you're not aware, the school reviews went back to 5 years. It doesn't matter if you're for the admin review. It doesn't matter if you're with the food service management company or not. All school reviews are now back at the 5 year. What happened was we had the consultants, when we got their list, we wanted to keep the procurement review in the same fiscal year or the same year that you were getting reviewed. Sometimes we had to change it due to the fact if you're with the food service management company, we have to do them every 3 years. That's why you may not be in the same year, but it may be a little jumbled a little bit right here because we, as much as possible, we would like to keep them together in the same years. So if you're like, I just got one, why am I getting another one? It's because we're trying to follow that the year process if possible. We have resources available to you, CARS, and then again, under other documents is where all of our procurement stuff is. We have the child nutrition manual under the procurement section. And then we also have ICN, which is the Institute of Child Nutrition, for any other resources you might have on procurement. I will tell you, if you have any questions about procurement, Dana and myself, or even Mona, I don't know if she's listening today, us three did procurement reviews for, well, we did them for all 3 years. We did them only procurement reviews for 2 years. We did not even do our own school reviews. We solely focused on procurement. So I think us three feel like we have a better understanding, but I'm telling you, it's a work in progress. I feel like every year we learn something completely different about procurement, but I hope this training helps, especially with the methods of procurement. It's because it's not a reminder, it's not about the dollar amount, it's how you procure it. There are thresholds, so once you hit those thresholds and go over, you are required to do the next, so say informal then to formal, but the main thing is how you procure it is, and like I said, I think most of you are doing small purchase procedures. So we thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, we are here. Again, go check out those handouts, that flow chart. I hope you guys like it. They got it from USDA or they found it at a USDA meeting. I think it's great. It will definitely easy. I don't think we didn't get it in the manual this year, but hopefully next year we can get it in there. But thank you guys. We'll send out the Q&A. We will put the Q&A also into CARS, but we will send that out. It'll give us some time because we're going to compile the ones from last week and this week together. So. And you will be receiving a certificate for attending today. We will email those out. But thank you. If you have any questions, feel free. We'll be here for just a little bit.
I think we had, one question on, Kendra's trying to look up the page number on the state contract to give you more information on how to go about that. Most of the time people will contact Cisco and tell them they're interested in the state contract, and there is a specific salesperson that will visit with you, or you can contact Teresa Johnson, and I believe that's what she's looking up to get her email address for us. And remember, we will email the certificates with the chat questions when we get them all finished. So if you are waiting on that, it'll be a little bit. Remember, we do have our Zoom call today at 2:30 for the all district COVID-19 question and answer session. And remember, put your questions in the chat, not in the Q&A section. Someone asked about the wave. Yes, there's some things going on. Join us this afternoon in the COVID-19 Q&A. We're going to have more information about the wave at that point in time. Okay, Kendra's listed the procurement section on the manual page P2939. And we're going to head and let you guys go for today. You guys have been awesome. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for the questions. Again, if we can do anything for you here at the State Department, please do not hesitate to give us a shout or an email. Will the COVID-19 Zoom meeting be available later? The question and answers will be. Thank you guys. Gary, we can hang up at this